So, Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Give us a little background about yourself. What do you do? Where do you work? Tell us a little bit about you, man.
Yeah, man. Obviously, I'm Gary, born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. Moved out to Colorado when I was in high school. Then from there, I went to Michigan, and then I started my law enforcement career in Alabama, and I've worked in North Alabama ever since. Currently, right now, I work interstate crime enforcement for a small town department or small city, and we work I-65. Yeah, man, I've been in law enforcement for about 3.5 years. Started in corrections and then moved on onto the road. And, you know, I love Fourth Amendment stuff. I mean, I'm a search and seizure instructor. Every opportunity I get, man, I love training. Um, I've been to pretty much every interdiction class I can go to and just trying to sharpen my craft and do my thing.
Yeah, man. How many classes have you paid for out of pocket? I mean, because we both know there's a lot of schools and classes and companies out there, man. Out of everything, and I've worked for a lot of departments, so like I paid for a lot. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I've had to pay for majority of my classes, just because it's hard to get, especially being newer into law enforcement. A lot of these agencies don't want to start investing into you until they know that you're gonna, work out and be there for a while and have some type of loyalty to them. Um, with that being said, I've had to pay probably about, if I had to like make an amount, it's probably about 2 grand is what I've put into myself in trainings. Like I've taken Craig Myers Blue to Gold class and, um, the search and seizure instructor, Kenny's class, Bauer Brown's class, your class. So all of that is, thankfully where I'm at now, they finally have started paying for my stuff. And, that's been a blessing. But man, you really had to pay for it in the beginning to get what I wanted. So,
Yeah, man, you hit it on the nail, man. And I say that all the time. A lot of new guys, and I help out a lot of people, man. And people like are really struggling on class. Like I've always given out free seats if it's that bad, right? But man, I've paid for a lot of training out of pocket, and that just comes to like investing in yourself. No one's going to invest in you, your own agency, more than yourself. So I always tell people that. So it's always amazing to hear people say that. But a lot of us successful interdictors are in the country. We've paid for a lot of training out of pocket, and that's just kind of the way it is. And a lot of us started in small departments, kind of like myself and like yourself as well, man. So yeah, man. So kind of want to talk about, got a couple topics today we're going to talk about, man. So I want to talk a little bit about, how we're going to, how do you define, proactive policing versus reactive policing? Obviously we're back in the Trump era and Trump's back in office. So policing is like back to being really proactive now, but how do you define, even in your particular area, if you want to give some insight on your area out in the South, proactive policing versus reactive?
So when I think about proactive policing, I think about creating pressure, and not waiting for crime to come to you. And reactive is cleaning up the mess, and proactive is you know cleaning up before it even gets there. And so, reactive policing is taking your calls, taking your reports after it's already happened, taking the B&E report because you didn't patrol the parking lot, or taking the theft call because you didn't stop the guy on the road. And so, proactive policing is getting out, making stops. Heck, even community policing, just being over at the gas station, talking to the attendant, and creating that bond with your community. Because once you start making bonds with your community, you might be going in to go get your ghost energy drink, and attendants can be like, "Hey, come here. I heard something or something's going on." And a lot of people don't realize it's not just making traffic stops. It's getting out, doing your business checks on foot. One thing that I really like doing is like, if I've got a Motel 6 or some type of motel, I love doing foot patrols through there. I've not had any great success where I'm currently at with them yet, but my previous city, we'd catch people in the act of stuff, man. And so, and you see a lot of officers that are in these large metropolitan areas. They're getting big hits, man, by just walking their motels and walking their gas stations and doing foot patrols. It's the dying breed, as Craig calls it. And so it's that's the kind I love proactive policing, man. It makes it to where your shift goes by pretty quick. I hate just staying stagnant in one area, because if you're anything like me, man, that I if I'm not doing something, I feel like it's dragging. It sucks. But when I'm stopping cars, getting out, searching, cars, talking to people, man, the shift goes by like that, and it doesn't even feel like I'm working.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. You're 100% right. And you talk about foot patrol. So a lot of people don't know about my background. I worked down in the Grand Canyon for about a year and a day before I moved out, and everything in that particular area, or in Arizona where I was at, is 95% on foot. We had ATVs and side by sides, but most agency stuff is broke. So you had your two good God given feet, and we did a lot of foot patrols, man. But just in my career in general, I can probably think of two supervisors that stand out my entire law enforcement career that were just extremely go out there, hammer crime. Like, I don't want to see you in the office. If you don't have an arrest, if you don't have paperwork, get out of the office. Like, I don't want to see you in the office. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of supervisors like that. Now, I get, yes, you may have a jurisdictional area, or maybe just a demographical area where, you know, you're pleasing the public to some degree, because you may have like a city council and they don't want you to go out and write tickets. They don't want you to go out and be proactive. But then you talk about like the metropolitan areas, they have a lot going on. They have 15, 20 calls pending. They don't want to be out there chasing calls or doing extra stops, which would be your reactive stuff. I'm sorry, your proactive stuff. They don't want to be having that on top of taking their calls. And then you're going to have your shift people kind of getting upset at you for being proactive. So I kind of been on all ends of the spectrum of trying to be, proactive. And then unfortunately people within the agency, whether it's supervisors or usually it's, even the inner team, the shift, because they don't want you to kind of take away. They want you to take some calls, take some weight off of that. And I totally agree with that. But, I wanted to be, for me, I wanted to just get away, man. And what about you? I mean, you've been to a couple of agencies. Have you just tried to like get into interdiction? Like, what got you to want to do interdiction?
So when I first started out, I was a big traffic guy, man. I love traffic. I still love traffic. When I get the opportunity to sit and do some type of saturation, I mean, I love doing it because you know at the end of the day, interdiction and all that sexy stuff, it's awesome. But when you work for an agency like me, we're doing interdiction, we're taking calls, we have a lot of stuff that we've got to do. And so as much as you want to patrol the interstate and you want to hit your hot areas where there's drug activity going on, if you're not taking care of the foundational stuff, then that other stuff's going to be taken away. And so so yeah, I started out in doing traffic, and I love DUIs, man. Loved them, and for me they were just so easy, and um, it got me going whenever I was able to get a bunch of DUIs off the street. And so, however, when I was working with a shift of about 8 guys, I had to, I was pretty much made the traffic guru. Hey, man, here's a DUI. Can you come take it over for me? I'm like, yep, here I come. But it didn't start off like that, man. So like when I first started working my sector, I'd be making these DUIs, and then these guys are like, man, now I'm having to catch calls for Chapman because he's taking all these DUIs and he's creating more work for me. And so starting off in my career, it was a real rough patch with that, until I finally was able to sit down with guys and be like, look, man, I don't like working X, Y, and Z calls. You don't like working DUIs. You don't like working wrecks. You don't like working this kind of stuff. How about when that comes out in your sector, I'll catch those calls. And when this comes out in my sector, you catch those calls. And I created that good bond with my guys because that's the understanding we had. And they had no problem sitting with a car that I arrested the guy on DUI for, because they knew I was gonna do something in return for them. Every time I cleared that jail, even if they just had a simple report call, and I knew they just sat with my car for 30 minutes or however long it took to a tow truck to get there, I'd take it for them. So whenever you want to be proactive, some of these guys that don't really, they might not want to understand the proactivity. Sometimes you got to kind of cater to them a little bit. And it's just politics, man. Even on the shift level, there's politics everywhere. And so playing that shift level politics, like, hey man, I'll catch that call for you. they'll love it. And so just those little things go a long way. And that's the kind of stuff that I learned to do. And it really opened up my possibilities. And so as much as I love DUIs and stuff, man. So the first department I worked for, we did 4 months night shift, 4 months day shift. And so when I moved to day shift, I was like, man, I can't find any DUIs anymore. Like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with all my time? And so that's when I started, taking classes about proactive policing and, you know, uh, finding narcotics, reaction based stuff. And that's when I took Craig Meyer's class, mastering proactive policing for patrol. And that's when I started learning about like the limbic system, the fight or flight response, and reaction based policing and contacts. And man, when I started doing that, when I started catching on to it, man, it was like Pandora's box opening, and it opened up a whole different level of policing for me. And man, I was making drug arrest after drug arrest after drug arrest. And guys were like, man, what is he doing? Like, how is he making all these stops? And guys would come car to car with me and be like, man, what are you looking for? What are you doing? And it kind of put me in a whole different role with my agency. And man, I loved it. I loved being able to go out and feeling like I made a difference. Because, I feel like truly that all crime is based around narcotics. Your thieves, your burglars, your stuff like that. They're trying to get money to pawn off to get more drugs and stuff like that. And there's all types of studies, and that. And so when you're able to get out there and make that impact, not only are you getting the users and stuff like that, but you're also starting to get into that mid to high level DTOs, drug trafficking organizations. You really start feeling like you're having an impact, and you start being able to contribute on a broader level. Hey man, you only got 2 grams. Well, let's call the drug unit, and then you hand this guy over to the drug unit, and then the drug unit calls you 3 months, 4 months later, and like, hey man, remember that Joe Smo that you had 2 grams on him? Well, he just got us a kilo, or he just got us this, and it's like, wow, that little stop for window 10 or whatever it was that got that 2 grams turned into some major drug operation. So I say major from my area. So man, so when you asked me what got me into proactive policing, it was training, man, and what got me into interdiction was realizing the impact you can have by just getting out and talking to people, having proactive stops, and trying to make an impact in your community.
Dude, isn't it amazing that when you go out there and you look for stuff that just doesn't sit right? Reasonable suspicion, you find probable cause, put that car on the shoulder, and you go through your stop and you find something that you weren't necessarily looking for. It's crazy, man. And when you really think about it, it's not, and it's just about being proactive, going out there, stopping cars. You talked about DWIs, man. A lot of interdiction guys that I know and girls around the country, man, we all started, a high percentage of us, DWI Nazis, bro. Like, we were just chasing DUIs, man. One of my buddies, he's in the group, and we worked together. And man, we had a board. We were just chasing like who can get the most DWIs. And dude, we were killing it. I mean, we were getting 40, 50 DWIs, within we were in like a really alcohol related area, but we were getting a lot a month, man. Repeated offenders, stuff like that. Dude, DWIs is where a lot of proactive interdiction starts, man. But at the end of the day, getting out there, stopping cars, yes, you might be out there stopping for a minor violation, but looking past that stop, that's where a lot of new officers, I get probably tons of messages. I don't know about you, but I get tons a day. I probably got 35 to go through. Today's my day off. And a lot of them are going to be, what do I look for? What type of behavior? I work this area, and at the end of the day, it's just like, I don't particularly work these areas, but I promise you, if you get out there and you are being proactive and you're looking for things that stand out, amongst the normal stuff, look for the irregular stuff, you're going to find criminal activity. Now, to what degree, low level, high level, mid level, a lot of that's going to play a factor of where you are, what type of jurisdiction you're working, and more importantly, what type of cars and people you're contacting, right? I know Craig Meyer talks a lot about, people that are out, riding around the community on bicycles and people that are on foot. Those are great contacts, and like, don't avoid those. Don't just look for the cars, try to have a consensual encounter with these individuals and go up and talk to these people, man. So spot on, man, but yeah, dude, that's where a lot of us get that fire lit in us. We start getting DWIs, but then we're looking over at the NARC unit and they're like, yeah, we get a kilo and got some guns, and we're like, I want to find that. And they're like, yeah, there's other cars out there, and you start going out there looking for it. So it's out there. I don't care where you work. So with that being said, man, so I know we talk a lot, and I've had a lot of dudes and girls that are on here, man, that we talked about, highway. I really want to focus on like inner city, man. And I know you have an inner city style background. Man, give us some tips and tricks, from your side where you work out. I'm sorry, where you work in the South in relation to inner city from highway. What are you doing? What are you seeing? Because I know you've had obviously a lot of success working inner city. So what do you see in your area, man?
So, I'll start off by, man, I'm no professional. I haven't been doing it as long as some of these guys out here. But a lot of the motivational stuff that you post, man. Just be better than the day you were before. And that's the kind of thing that I put into my career. It's like, look, I might have gotten, however many ounces or pounds the day before. Now it's time to beat that. And so when I think about inner city stuff, the big thing to me is reactions. It don't matter what they're driving. It doesn't matter what area they're in. I want to see their reaction to my marked patrol vehicle. So if I'm setting up, perpendicular to a road, it doesn't even have to be, you know, like we're talking about, you don't have to be on the interstate in the median. You can be sitting where you have your most traffic coming through your area. Even if you work for a one stop sign town, you can be sitting at that stop sign to where you're the most important thing in that intersection. And just look how people react to you. See how the normal people, like the normal reactions are. People are going to be looking at you, wondering what you're doing. Well, then look at that guy that's just okay. That comparing him to the general motoring public, that was weird. Now let's find a violation. Now let's see what's going on. Because if everyone's looking at you, and then all of a sudden a guy comes in and he's chill, but when and then he sees you 10-2, looking straight forward. Well, that's the guy that you want to come out and make contact with, because you want to see why that was odd. Why is he doing that? And again, you got to get all the biases out of your head. You got, there's implicit bias. That's a big class that every Alabama police officer had to take. It was implicit bias. But we all have these biases coming into policing. We're all thinking this equals that. Well, throw that out of the window, because once you throw that out of the window, you're going to see just how much more there is going on. Because criminal organizations know your biases, and they love your biases because they counter it. That's all they do. They look for someone that is not fitting the regular, and that's who they're having move their narcotics for them, or moving their money for them, or doing some type of criminal activity. And so, yeah, when I'm doing my inner city stuff, which, like I was talking about earlier, our agency, we have to divide it. We can't just be interstate 24/7, because we also have, a city to patrol. And so I love areas like gas stations. I like motels, like I was talking about earlier. If we're having an increase in breaking and enterings in one area, I like saturating that area, and having a good police presence. But ultimately, when I do my gas station patrols, I'll look at how are people, again, it's all reactions. I'm looking at how those people are reacting to me just slow rolling the gas station. Um, and a lot, like one time I made so I was going through a gas station. It's like 2 a.m, nothing going on. It's freaking quiet, the Q word that no one likes talking about. And I'm just like, man, this shit's dragging. And so I go through this parking lot, and I see this guy. He's got a newer, nice car. He's in like construction clothes, and he's like in super beat up clothes, and he's fueling up, and he's got no care in the world until he sees my patrol car, and then immediately he stops fueling up, puts his gas pump back up, and he gets back on the road. And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. Why did he react that way after seeing me? And so the guy fails to stop coming out of private property, and for us, that's a violation. Down him, get up to the car. Man, there was all types of just abnormal behavior. I know we don't like saying nervous, but there was all types of abnormal behavior. Guys stuttering, he couldn't get out a sentence. His story wasn't making any type of sense. So I get him out of the car, get him out for an interview, start talking to him. I get his name. His name's not, coming back on, our LETs, which is our, NCIC basically. And I start, diving into his story more, his name. Turns out he had nationwide extradition warrants for some type of theft. And then I asked him where he got this vehicle from. Vehicle was coming back fine, but it wasn't coming back to him. And it was coming back to a completely separate city where he lives. And so I was like, whose car is this? Oh man, it's my friend's. He let me borrow it. I'm like, okay, what's your friend's name? The friend's name didn't match the registered owner. And so I had a feeling that this car might have been stolen based off his warrants, and based off his behavior. And we call the police department to go do a knock and talk. They had they had call volume up to the freaking ceiling, so they weren't able to do it. So I ended up taking this guy on this warrant. I drop him off with the sheriff's office that had the nationwide warrant for him. Well, then I get an email from my sergeant the next day. Hey, Chapman, John Smith that you were out last night with had, that vehicle was stolen, fresh steal. The PD confirmed it 3 hours after your shift when they finally were able to go take that call. And man, what did that start off on? That started off on just me uh, paying attention. That guy had a weird, behavior shift from when he saw me. And then, stuff wasn't adding up in the interview. And so really a small violation, not stopping when coming out of private properties, turned into nationwide extraditable warrants with a fresh stolen vehicle, and a great case. I mean, it turned into a great case. That sheriff's office ended up getting warrants for him for the theft. And, it bada bing, bada boom. That's what I live for. I love stuff like that. As much as I like getting drugs off the street, I also like, victim crimes, a stolen vehicle. I love getting their vehicle back to them. I love getting these people that are preying on people. I like getting them. I like having them held responsibly and doing it in the most legal way, so that everything gets admitted into court. And I mean that case is going to be. I mean, that was a textbook case. It was awesome, and kind of what I live for.
Yeah, man, there's nothing like recovering somebody's stolen property, man. Someone, breaking into your, when I was young, like teenager wise, I was living out in the DC area, and somebody broke into my apartment and my parents' apartment, man, stole all our stuff. There's nothing worse than having your stuff taken from you, but there's no better feeling, like you said, man, like actually being on the other side and recovering that property back and getting it back for that victim, man. And that's very important, man. And you hit a lot of points, and you talked about one of the key things. You've been to my class, I talk about this. You have to remove your personal biases, right? Because someone else's norm doesn't make it norm for you, right? You have to, I always tell people that, like, just because it doesn't sound normal for you doesn't mean that that's not their norm, right? You have a lot of culture biases that people, we're human, but we do turn on. We don't realize it. But when you start working in a career field like us, we try to learn to, okay, I see this individual, maybe their pants is hanging down low, and they have a hat backwards, but hey, maybe that person could be a local, musician or an artist or something like that. And that's just part of their swagger or their style, right? Versus like, oh man, it's a gangbanger, right? So we talk about stuff like that, removing your personal biases. That's very important for what we do. But more importantly for interdiction, you talked about it earlier. When you're looking for mid-level, high-level, these criminal organizations, these DTOs, they're not going to, like the higher levels, right? They're not going to go look for the dude driving the 1998 Nissan Sentra or Maximum, riding on these shiny wheels, riding around town. They're not going to go do that, right? Because for, law enforcement in general, especially those that work inner city, that's low crime, like attractive to a lot of law enforcement, right? So they're going to go out and they're going to find like these, 5-10-year-old BMWs, Jaguars, Range Rovers, very low window tint, no equipment violations that can, drive through an area and not draw a lot of attention. And then more importantly, the person driving it is going to be coming off, more respectable. They're going to be well dressed, well mannerism, So I tell people, man, all the time, if you want to find mid-level, high-level criminal activity, and notice I didn't just say drugs, I'm talking about across the board, you have to step out of your comfort zone and you have to start looking for cars you wouldn't normally stop. or people you wouldn't normally stop because right because they not may not always be on foot. You talked about gas stations, hotels, motels, and those are excellent. And I definitely encourage because people need gas and people need rest, especially for people that are traveling from county to county, city to city, state to state, coast to coast. They are going to want to gas up. Most cars are, even the electric cars, most of the bigger gas stations now are at facilities, like pilots and stuff for them to gas up, man. So gas stations are huge. Never like run those out. And, I worked for a couple of different agencies in the beginning where I couldn't work the highway. So having gas stations right off the highway or a major city, I was still crushing it. And then, you have those administrators like, all right, well, I know what you're doing. So stop it. Go back in the city. Like, so yeah, man, it's like the little cat and mouse games you got to play internally, but no, all good, man. So I want to talk to you a little bit about working at night. So what do you see and what are some of the best tips that you can think of to give some of the viewers in regards to working city and even the highway, but working at night?
Yeah, so working at night, man, I love it. I mean, that's as much as I love having a normal, schedule and being able to be out when everyone's awake. I also like I also like working the nighttime because it creates a whole different type of challenge, and it's where majority of officers start out at. So the big thing that I take into account when working night shift is most of us, honey-do list, a honey-do list, your wife gives you, but, in the sense of what is your command wanting you to do on your shifts? They're wanting you to hit every road. They're wanting you to check these businesses. And for me, I like getting that stuff out of the way immediately. Right when I start my shift, I want to get everything done. I want to get all my business checks done. I want to get all my roads patrolled so that the only thing that I have to focus on the rest of the night is getting after it, getting proactive, being proactive. Um, Something you hit on earlier was, different agencies have different call volumes and different responsibilities. For me, I've been fortunate enough, man, to work low call volume areas, low call volume departments. And that's something that I look at for me when I apply somewhere is, what is their call volume? That's a question I ask because if I'm going to be proactive, well, I need to make sure that, I'm not going to be just answering calls all the time. And so, when you look at someone who works for like NYPD or something, those guys, those patrol guys are working call to call to call to call. And so when you look at someone with that type of experience, and then you look at someone who's only been able to do proactive policing, this guy who's worked NYPD 15 years, he's might only been able to work 20 narcotics cases in his whole career because, he stumbled on something or, he just happened to be in the right place in the right time. Well, then you look at someone like me who, man, all I've got is time. All I've got is to be able to be proactive. Well, I'm doing is stopping cars. And so 20 narcotics cases is like 2 months, or a month. And so it's like when you look at night shift, those type of opportunities are there because you're going to have more time. You're not answering, hey, you know, you're not have to answering the theft call that occurred in the morning, or you're not working as many wrecks. So night shift for me, when I so I get all my stuff out of the way and then I go to my area. So if it's the interstate, then I try, during the summertime when the sun's still out, I like working when the sun's still out, and then that transition into nighttime. Because during the daytime, I'm able to look at more driver reactions. How are they reacting when they're passing my patrol vehicle, stuff like that. But once it starts becoming nighttime, I'm having to rely a lot more on how is the vehicle responding to my presence. And so my biggest tip for guys is, before you start jumping into interdiction and jumping into stuff, um, get a baseline first, because when you're articulating yourself to the court, to your admin, and to all these people, if you don't have something to compare what the normal is and what the abnormal is, you're going to have a hard time with not only your admin but the court, because a lot of the thing that I do the most in my report is comparative analysis. I say based off my training and experience, comparing the general motoring public to this individual that I'm in contact with, I observe the following to be abnormal. And then, the defense attorney is going to ask you on the stand, well, why is that abnormal? Well, thank you for asking me that. When I stop people for normal speeding and I tell them immediately that they're going to be getting a warning, that nervousness is done. That abnormal behavior is done right there. But this person, I told him that he's only getting a warning, and all that abnormal behavior was still present. And not only was him present, he's lying about basic things like, where is she coming from? Or, I had one case where I asked a guy, where was he, where was he coming from? And he's like, my kid's school. And I was like, what's the kid's school name? And he couldn't tell me what the school name was. And that happens a lot. I've heard that story. A lot of officers have that same exact story. And so it's like, get your base level first, find out what your traffic is doing in your area, because, it's like you work all different types of areas, different states, because of the task force that you're on. I'm sure when you go to a different area, what they're doing in, your south region compared to your north region is completely different, because there's a whole different type of culture, because that state police over there might be writing people for going 10 over. Whereas if, the state police down south in a different state, they might let someone get away with going 20 over. And so you really got to, before you start picking out, okay, I've got this, and this, this cluster of behaviors. Well, you need to figure out, is that just normal for your area, or, is that actual, abnormal behavior?
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And you hit it on the nail. And yeah, I do work in multiple states, 5 primarily, but like I do have to go up to like the Northwest region, like Washington State. And yeah, man, it is night and day, in regards to what the locals may stop people for, and then the minor violations. I come in and it's still legal, right? That I stop them for. And they're like, well, in California, we can go 10 over. That's my favorite. I'm like, no, it is. No, you can't. Like, look up the law. Like, show me where it says you can go 10 over. And obviously, we know that there's nothing in the statute that says you can go 10 over. But yeah, man, dealing with stuff like that all the time, man. And you talked about a lot about the norm, right? And this is what I tell folks all the time. And don't stop messaging me if you guys are out there and you're watching. Like, but you have to understand, like, I may not work your area, but I do work multiple states. And I'm in one state or another state more than the other. So I do bounce around, and I do have to get accustomed and adjusted when I go back to an area maybe I haven't been to in a few weeks or maybe even a few months. So yeah, I have to get accustomed to the norm. So like I was just down in the Nogales, Tucson area. I was down there for a few weeks working. And what I see up north, like maybe like on interstates like I-40 and stuff like that, it is night and day when I go down and I work like I-19 and I-10, I-8. Like it's the traffic, the higher level echelon, they're using more local cars. So if someone was looking for rentals, yeah, good luck. There's no rentals for the most part, like down on the southern border. Like everything's local, it's local plated. They're older cars. So you really have to focus on behavior. And I tell people that all the time, you really have to go out, identify what is normal for your area. And then from that, look for people that stand out, that go against what normally people would do. So sit in an open area where people can see you. Don't hide your patrol cars. Don't sit in between buildings. All these things are things that are not, that are basically working against you. If you're hiding your vehicle, you're tucked in between buildings and stuff like that. You're blacking out that was a big one. I did that when I was young because I thought that was super effective. I would black out my lights and sit in the median or on the shoulder and, oh my God, I got 20 over. I'm gonna go get them. And yeah, like, have I gotten a few pursuits and some stuff like that and user amounts of dope or even, street sales amounts? Yes. But, folks, the majority of the viewers that are watching, they want to go out and they want to find higher level, mid-level criminal activity in your area. And if you're doing these things and you're not staying visible and you're not looking for people that are reacting to your presence, you're going to stay with your low-hanging fruit. And I know there's people out there, well, low-hanging fruit matters. And yes, it does. I'm not telling you to avoid low-hanging fruit. I'm telling those that want to excel their career, you have to kind of open your mind and you have to kind of just move away from the low hanging fruit and ignore it almost in that sense to find the mid-level, high-level individuals, man. So yeah, it's something out there that everybody has the opportunity to knock down. It's just a matter of how bad do you want it, So with that being said, man, let's kind of move in. So we talked about, working nights. Let's talk about, man, Kenny didn't want to talk about it when we did our one the other day, and I totally agree with them. But it's a never ending topic. And you don't work for a highway agency, right? You work for a smaller department. So for I think people hearing it from you versus guys like us, me, Kenny, Jeremy, other guys that work the highway, how do you incorporate front seat interviews? What people do you put in your vehicle, and what people do you not put in your vehicle?
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're work for an agency that's never done front seat interviews, this is a conversation you got to have with your supervisor, like straight up, because you don't want them to see that you're on body camera or dash camera the first time that there's a front seat interview going on, and they're going to freak out, because that was what happened with me. The first thing that I did, I was like, man, I watched one of Kenny's videos that he posts in the group chat, and I was like, man, I need to put someone in my front seat and watch their eyebrows, and like stuff like that. Like I'm going to do exactly what Kenny did. I'm going to ask the exact same questions, and I did it. And my lieutenant, he was watching videos, as they're required to do for that agency I used to work with, and I thought he was going to have a heart attack, because he's like, why is this guy in your front seat? Like, did you do X, Y, and Z? Oh my gosh, what are we doing? Because it was just out of nowhere that I just started doing it, because I picked something up during a training video and I just went out and did it. So then I had that conversation with my lieutenant, and I was like, hey, this is what, I watch. This is what they do. This is very legal. I was like, here's the case law. Here's what I do. And stuff like that. And when I had that conversation with him, he was a lot more open to the idea of it, compared to just I sprung it on him. And I know a lot of guys go off the ask for forgiveness later, mantra. But for me, where I worked, that was not a good mantra to go off of, because he would lose his ever loving mind. And so, yeah, so the first thing you got to do is check with your supervisors and make sure it's something you do, or that you can do. Because I worked for one supervisor that just absolutely did not allow it. So I had to go about it a different way. And so, you know, the biggest thing, once you get past that hurdle, know you obviously look up your case law in your area. There's certain states where you can't even do it, unless you have reasonable suspicion to move them out of the car, which Alaska is one of them that I can remember off the top of my head. For some reason, there's this, obscure case law that says that they've got to have different types of uh, suspicion to pull them out of the car and put them in your front seat for an interview. And I really think that all came off of someone just didn't articulate it properly, when they did it. And so now you've created bad case law for the rest of the people in your area. But anyway, um, so once you know it's policy okay and legally okay in your area, well, now we need to figure out, is it safe? And so a great example is was actually during your class that I saw. That guy that was on that you got a couple ounces off of, but when you went to go do your front seat interview, you noticed that he was backing up and would not look away from you. And so obviously for us, that's like thinking tactically. Well, if it's like us, we don't turn our back to a suspect. And so when I saw that in your video, that's never happened to me. But that was like a big red flag. Okay, that guy's not going in my front seat interview, or he's not having a front seat interview, and I'm going to have to change my approach, because again, you safety is paramount when you're doing this job. Because there's been times where I look at my dash cam and I look at my body camera, or my sergeant points it out, and he's like, dude, come on, like, look at this. And it's like something you didn't even realize that you were doing created this huge officer safety risk. And so I've been fortunate to work somewhere where, I've got guys looking out for me, and they're like, man, maybe you should do it a different way. And because that was what ultimately that first lieutenant was trying to do. He was worried for my safety. But when he gave me these scenarios, like, hey, what would you do if this happened or this happened, I had answers for him. So before you start doing front seat interviews, make sure you train, in a sense, even if you're just creating like a mental file on, hey, what if someone tries to jump over the center console and try to grab my gun? And try to have these mental files so that when it happens, you're not just in shock. You have some type of mental file that you've stored and that you can go back and rely on and say, okay, I'm going to, do my whatever, get out of the car, do what I got to do. Um, but for me, the biggest thing why I like doing front seat interviews is it takes away all the distractions. I see a lot of guys that will do just they open their passenger door and they'll have that interview right there while they're writing their warning citation. But there's a lot of exterior factors now that you're having to take into consideration when you're asking your questions and you're getting your responses. So the big thing when you're doing these front seat interviews is you're doing that how are they responding to your questions, and you're deciding if they're being deceptive or not. And so if I ask a question and then there's a huge 18 wheeler that passes by on interstate level speeds or highway speeds, well, that person's not used to that, and he might have an abnormal response to where you might think, okay, he's showing signs of deception. He's being deceptive, when really that was just because a huge 18 wheeler and he thought he was going to die, because he thought he was going to get hit. And so that's why I like when you get in the front seat, it takes away those out exterior factors, and you're really able to kind of be a little like informal, because you're, hey man, I like your tattoos. You got great tattoos. They look like mine, and you can start having a conversation with someone. And they're kind of chilled out. You let them, hey man, here's the AC, if you want to put the heat on or whatever. You create that friendly atmosphere. So, because if you're just robotic, like I was in the start of my career, these people are going to be robotic back. They're going to be, whatever language or whatever vibes you're throwing off, they're going to start throwing off, because that's just human nature. They're going to adapt to what you're doing. And that's why, like, Sean's, he calls it the chameleon cop. Like, you have this alternate motive, which is, okay, I'm trying to see if this person is being deceptive or there's some underlying criminal activity, when you're just asking basic questions. Hey man, where are you coming from? What do you do for work? And then you get into the hard hitting questions. Any marijuana, any cocaine, and you're getting those different types of responses. So front seat interviews, man, they've changed my entire career, and I love them to death. But it definitely is a learning curve. I can't even tell you how many times where I'm like, dude, this guy's being deceptive. There's going to be a load in the car, and then I start searching it, and there's nothing but clothes and just minuscule stuff. And so, and I mean, how many times has that happened in your career? Because I mean, like, obviously, yeah, everyone knows, like, what people don't see from these, like, you big interdiction guys, like, they see all the loads, but they don't see all the misses. Okay, that I read that wrong, or there was some type of learning experience. And for me, one of my partners made fun of me one time because, like, I changed up what I was doing. And man, I went like a week and a half without hitting anything. I mean, not even a bud of marijuana, nothing. Because I was like, well, I want to try and change up what I'm doing, change up my interview style, and see if I can start hitting higher level DTOs. And it was like a week. It was like 2 to 3 weeks. I wasn't hitting nothing. And he made fun of me. He's like, man, go back to whatever you were doing before, because this ain't working out. And he was getting frustrated because, he was having to come help me search these cars. And he's like, man, like, do whatever you were doing before. And so, you know, ultimately, like, what helped me is, again, creating that baseline, finding out what I like doing, the questions I like asking, and then doing the front seat interviews, talking to people. When I look at who I'm going to pull back to my car, it depends on what I'm doing that shift. It's like I was telling you, if I'm working traffic and I'm just, because chief says, hey, we've had a lot of, speeding complaints in this area, I'm not going to pull them back in, and do a front seat interview, because that's not the objective of my patrol that day.
Right. The mission changes.
Yeah, the mission is different, and so, and that's the challenge that a smaller agencies have. Whereas you, I mean, that's what they want you to do. They want you to go out, and every traffic stop is an interdiction stop. And that's the mission of your stop. But even when you're doing these, when you're doing these traffic grants, you're doing these traffic level missions, you're going to stop someone that is doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And so once you, because there's been times where I've stopped a guy and I'm like, okay, hold on, I'm doing a speed enforcement right now, but this guy is showing signs of deception. And so then I turn that into an interdiction stop, and boom, you find an ounce, or you find something on them, to where, again, if I didn't have that 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 interdiction level training and experience, you know, I would have missed it.
Yeah, man. No, you talk about a lot, man. And a couple of the big things I saw, you had me laugh about one of Kenny's front seat interviews, man. When Kenny started putting his videos out there, man, the law enforcement, the proactive community for law enforcement went crazy, dude. You weren't the only one. People were going out doing front seat interviews, but Kenny will be the first to tell you as well, man. Front seat interviews have been around for decades, man. Oklahoma Highway Patrol, Texas State Police, just to name a few, man. Front seat interviews have been around for a long time. You talk about like the safety factor, and I showed the one video where the dude, I get him out of the pickup truck and I get him to the back of the car where I was going to greet him. But then I was like, hey, come on back to my vehicle. And then he literally starts taking back steps while his upper body is facing me, right? And, obviously my tactical mind triggered, like you said, we don't turn our backs to drivers, like especially for those that we don't know, right? In an unknown stop, like traffic stops are unknown. So I'm like, why is this dude walking backwards? But more importantly, my tactical mind is like, he's facing me, right? So we start talking about or thinking about like body armor, right? Like when we go to training, or even if you've been in the military, we're always taught and trained to some degree to face the threat, right? So if you do get shot, at least you have a good probability of at least maybe striking your vest. So you have a chance of survival, versus to the side, you start your torso and stuff start getting exposed. So yeah, man, there's a lot of things for sure, man, and I definitely agree. If you're thinking about going out doing front seat interviews and you do work inner city or even on a highway, yes, number one, you have to talk to your supervisors. That is very, very important. You have to be on the same page, and it's very important. And fortunately, a lot of us are working with agencies that don't have a problem with it, right? But more importantly, we train for it, right? We set our vehicles up a particular way, and we do it for safety purposes. So that way, if someone does come over the center console, we can react in a reactive manner. So don't just go out there if you've never, done front seat interviews and you say, oh, I'm just going to try this because I saw this on Nick's video or Kenny's videos or whoever, Sean's videos, right? You definitely have to make sure you kind of know what you're doing, man. Any key lessons, real quick, because we're coming up close to an hour, on, some field experiences on what experienced in front seat interviews? Like, how did you get over that fear factor of, okay, I'm going to do front seat interviews. Today is the day.
So the big thing that kind of made me push to start doing front seat interviews, I know I said it before, but it was watching other guys do it. It was going to training. It was finding out what I was looking for when dealing with like, okay, doing a front seat interview is great and all, but what questions am I going to start asking? If I do see deception, well, what legally can I do? What's the approach that I want to take? And I had to figure all that out first. And so that's when I started, studying case law, talking with my partners, especially if they don't know what to do, then I don't know what to do. And so, I tell them like I had a canine partner, and so we had this kind of like sign. If I start asking certain questions, it's because there's something going on, and he didn't even have to ask me, because he started getting a routine of like, okay, if he's asking these kind of questions and he's starting to dive deep into narcotics, well, he's gonna grab the dog and do a free air sniff, and there's an alert. Boom, he tells me it, because I had an earpiece, so I would hear it on the radio. He says canine alert, and but that didn't mean the interview stopped. I still kept going, and there was more times where I got PC based off what this guy's saying than solely on the canine alert. Yes, I did have the canine alert to get in the vehicle, but I'd be like, hey man, I'd pull the Julian line. Me, man, you didn't get stopped by the normal police, man. You're So what do we got going on? You're showing these signs of deception, man. It's what I'm trained in. You be honest with me, and let's see where we go. Let's see where this can go. Oh man, sorry, I've got 5 ounces in the car. I got it from X, Y, and Z, and I've not even searched the car yet. And, this guy, he realizes like I'm caught. I'm red handed, and so he starts going into what's in the car. And there's been times where people will sit on it, man. Oh man, there's nothing in there. Nope, nothing in there. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna throw you in the back seat, and then me and my partner start searching the car, and we pull out bags, man. And so um, the biggest thing that I the biggest thing that pushed me to start doing interdiction was or start doing front scene interviews is I wasn't happy with the like you say, the low hanging fruit. I was getting grams, I was getting, marijuana, and the easy stuff, like, because I walk up to the car, you smell marijuana, okay, I was getting in the car, because in Alabama, obviously, it's still illegal. And so, what really started making me want to do stuff differently is because that's all I was getting. I wasn't getting big stuff. I wasn't getting, or at least what I consider big stuff. Um, and, the first traffic stop that I ever made was, it ended up being actually a missing juvenile, reported out of Pennsylvania, and they were in Alabama. And so, that was my first ever traffic stop. And I wouldn't have known to ask those questions that I did if I wasn't in Street Cop, Facebook group, if I wasn't taking my own initiative to go out and seek training, because that department wasn't going to send me to interdiction level of training. They weren't going to send me to investigative interviewing. Those are stuff that I had to do. And so I made that first stop, but it didn't click for me that that was like an interdiction level stop. And when I started, there was a time in my career I was like, man, these DUIs are great, but it's also a lot of politics. What people don't realize is DUIs is one of the most litigated charge out there. Like, because, you're getting all types of different people. You're getting the businessman and you're getting the college student. I mean, and so there's a lot of politics that come involved when it comes to DUIs. Like, I arrested a former state legislator for DUI.
Oh yeah, yeah, man. When they lose their license, yeah, that's where they want to fight to keep their license because it's a privilege. It's not a right to drive. And you start talking about businessmen and people that are in like higher level positions where they have to drive. They need a license. Law enforcement, firefighters, right? You need that driver's license. So it's definitely political for sure, man. So I wanted to move in a direction that I know a lot of cops out there, to include myself, at some point in time in our careers, maybe even actively or currently. I know me and Dakota, we talked a lot about it, man. But mental health, especially in just the law enforcement in general, man. What are some lessons, for some tough situations or even some rewarding situations where mental health came into a factor? How did you deal with it? What's some advice you can even give to some of the individuals, officers that may even be in a group going through some type of a mental health, situation right now?
Yeah, man. So, ultimately, if you're not being taken care of, you're not going to be able to take care of others. That's the big thing that I heard in a class or some type of training, that if the responder is not in a good mental place, then how are you going to help others? Because ultimately, man, when you're going out to calls and when you're going out to and you're stopping people, these are going to be people's worst day in their life, because you could be getting enough drugs off this person that they're going to prison for a long time, and they're going to be in a mental place that's not good. And you know as much as you know this person, you know they know that they've had this much drugs on them, or whatever it might be. How did they get in that position in the first place? Are they being taken advantage of? Is something being held over their head? And so if you're gonna if the people that I feel like the most impact on sometimes are the people that I'm arresting. And I learned that from my dad. Every time he'd arrest someone, man, they have that backseat interview, and it's you're talking with them, And hey, brother, can I pray for you? Can I do these kind of things? And so, I'm not going to be mentally available to do that if I'm not taken care of first. And there's been a lot of times in my career where I'm like, man, is this even worth it? Is going out, putting my life on the line, my mental health on the line, even worth it? Like, am I even making an impact? And then I just have to remind myself of my faith. I'm a very religious person, and I owe everything to God. And so whenever I'm facing times, man, I pick up that Bible, or I start going. I always go to church every other Sunday as much as I can. But sometimes, man, it's just like I also got to look at what have I done in my career that if I wasn't in this career, how many people of what how many things could have went differently? All those DUIs that I stopped, how many people could they have killed? Or all the drugs that I've got, how many grams of fentanyl have I taken off the street to where that could have killed a large amount of people? So really, when I'm in my mental health areas, because I have them all the time. I mean, if I'd be lying if I said, man, I've never had any doubts for mental health. But whenever I get in my mind like that, that's ultimately what I rely on. I rely on my faith. I rely on my partners a lot of the time. Because if they're sometimes dealing with the same exact things, like like I'd call you when I'm going through stuff, and that, brother. And you're always there supportive, and you find guys that love doing the job and that you can talk to, because ultimately we got to take care of each other, because some people don't really understand going to that rec call and seeing the kind of things that we've seen. And if you can kind of talk to someone who's been through those type of things, that have more experience than with you, have seen the same stuff you're going through, they're able to give you advice on how they've gone through it. And so having faith, having a good, inner circle, and ultimately if and then checking back on, if you're having those questions, well, is it worth it? Is it worth, the impact, or is it worth staying with the job? Look at the impact that you've had. And if the impact you've had, if it even has helped one person, then you got to keep going. You got to keep doing what you're doing. And for me, it always reignites that fire in me. It reminds me what that 11-year-old boy was, what he wanted to be, which was me. I was 11 years old, wanted to be a police officer. I was doing ride-alongs when I was 16 years old. I was in a part of Explorer programs, and all that kind of stuff. And, it's that looking back at, hey, that's what I want to do. It's always what I want to do. I want to make my younger self proud. And ultimately, the question I ask too is, when I take my badge off, whenever that is, 25 years in Alabama is the retirement. But I say 25 years, and there's a lot of guys that say 25 years, but then they're deputies or officers for 30, 40 years. And so, but whenever that year is for me, if it's 30 or if it's 25, I want to be able to, when I put that badge in a shadow case, I want to be able to be proud of what I did when that was on my chest. And I want to be able to look at my kids and be like, I stood for something, and it was getting narcotics off the street, and I never faltered. I did not allow exterior things to get involved in my mission statement, because there's going to be politics. There's going to be situations that you're going to be thrown through the ringer. But ultimately, you know, why did you get into it? For me, it was making an impact on people. And so I can always put all that behind me and get back to the mission, get back to doing what I was doing, blocking out all the noise and getting after it, man.
And I know you talked a lot about mental health, and dude, when I first started teaching, obviously I went under Sean first and then came under Street Cop and then formed now on my own. And it's been almost a little over 3 years, but I've been teaching, internally for my department for a few years on top of that. And I'll say, man, mental health and what we do as law enforcement, man, it is, it's something that you definitely, if you need to talk to someone, you definitely got to talk to someone. And being in my current role and, teaching private sector, a lot of cops reach out, whether they're going through something, they have a question. And yeah, man, I do my best, and I'm not a therapist. I don't have a therapist background, but having someone you can, feel comfortable talking to and keeping that, whatever you have going on in your life private, man. I'm always there if anyone ever else needs something to talk about, man. And I talked about it when I had Dakota on, dude, I thought it was, really whack to be a dude to go talk to a counselor, man. And yeah, man, a few years ago, dude, I did it, bro. And you know what? It changed my life, right? On top of, being able to stand in front of thousands of cops across this country. I've been to lots of conferences, several thousand cops in front of me, and, kicking that nerves and to get up there and to talk about what I do for a living, but then even to come down and someone to pull you to a side and, hey, man, I love what you're doing, man, but I'm currently going through this. And like, hey, man, I probably can't help you right now, but I know someone that can, right? And being able to network and reach out and put them in the proper contact. Because a lot of stress, not only does it come from what we see on the job, going home to our families, bringing the job, so to speak, back home, that wears on our family and in having that family support. But even more importantly than that, man, like the internal mental health stress. And I've worked for a lot of agencies over my career, man. And I can tell you a lot of the mental health that I dealt with, even when I was in the military, right, coming from like the command, coming down to the lower line, man, that internal stress. A lot of supervisors, I would say this as a supervisor, I would say if you have an employee that made a mistake or did something wrong, before you just go in and, hammer down, maybe that employee probably has something going on in their personal life. Maybe that, they don't feel comfortable talking about that may have led to that bad contact, right? Because I know a lot of dudes, man, that'll go out there and stop cars. And they'll go up and they'll start the knife handing. They start yelling at the individual. And you're like, I've never seen Jimmy do that before. Like, what the hell's going on? Like, okay, maybe he's got like this weird driver and he's just trying to like tone this dude down. But then you start seeing it over and over through the shift and like sloppy reports and like, that's not Jimmy. Jimmy doesn't do that, right? And then you talk to Jimmy and you find out Jimmy actually just has some things going on at home. So I say a lot of supervisors that are just so quick to just write employees up. Maybe have a sit down with your employee and see if everything's going on okay, because you as supervisors, management, you are impacting officers as well, right? And I know we have a hard job, but, we talk about this thin blue line and this family of blue and brotherhood, but we're so quick to just jam an officer up, throw him under the bus versus, sitting down and talking to that officer, man. And so that internal stress, there's nothing like it. I've dealt with it several times over my career, man, and I'll say, dude, I just wish more supervisors would just take the second to just take a step back and just maybe have a good conversation with that employee. And shoot, even if nothing's going on, the simple fact, bring your employees in. Hey, how's everything going? I don't know I'm at the top of the food chain. I don't get to talk to the line guys a lot, but is everything going on okay at home? Is there anything we could do to help change? Do you need a mental health day? Like something like that, whatever it is, man, whatever your approach may be. Yeah, mentorship, man, like just reaching out and doing that. We don't get that a lot in law enforcement, and we're just, a lot of commands look at you like to go out and be tough and, just do the job, get the job done. But there's billions of people on this planet, and not every single person on this planet is built that way. So you can't put that, weight on someone's shoulders for every single person, because not everybody's built to be an operator. Not everybody's built to be interdiction. Everybody wants to. A lot of people want to try, but it's not something that it's built for, man. So in closing, if you could give one piece of advice to a young interdiction officer who's just starting out their career, what would that be?
So, biggest thing that I would encourage any proactive officer or anyone that's wanting to make a huge difference in their community is take the training, do the training, take as much of it as you can, and then listen to your proactive guys, listen to your leadership. But ultimately, your career is your career. So if you want to be known for sitting in a parking lot and that's what you want to do, then power to you. But that's not what I'm going to do. Because I've had supervisors that are like, man, just go sit somewhere and just answer your calls. And I'm like, no, that's not me. That's not why I got into it. And so take your training, get your training, spend your own money if you have to. And then, be proactive, man, get out there. You're going to mess up. I messed up. I still mess up. There's still times where I'm like, man, that was a bonehead move. I should, I knew better than to do that. But ultimately when you're doing what we're doing, we're going to mess up. Me and you talked about it. We're going to rush things on accident because we think it's just, we're gonna leave a wallet on a hood. You know, we're gonna do just bonehead moves, man, and it's just you're gonna mess up. You know, take your licks and move on and learn from it. And I feel like the reason why I wouldn't say I'm successful, you know, because I want to be a little more humble than that. But I feel like the reason why I can do what I do is because I've messed up so many times. You know, I have learned from my mistakes, and mistakes are my best training. And because when you realize you've done something wrong, you know, when you're doing that thing again, that mistake's going to play in your head, and you'll be like, okay, let's not do it like that this time. And so, and you know, just like Kenny has a good example of like when he didn't he didn't go under a car and then it had pounds of narcotics in it, and it's like I guarantee you, Kenny does not ever make that mistake again. And so, same thing with you. I'm sure you got stories like that where someone stopped a car a state over or something, and they're like, "Hey, man, you know, gotcha, you missed something," and we, you know, because the law enforcement we love poking fun at each other, but ultimately, man, it's just learning from your mistakes. And yeah, it's just you know doing your thing, man. So yeah, hmm, man, you hit a lot of things, man. But the biggest thing for me, when I look at my previous leadership, you know, I can take there's one thing that each of my leaders did that was phenomenal, you know, and I love them to death. That I and you know, there's not one supervisor that I've had that I can't say I learned something from, you know, and that you know, even though there might be things that they did that was completely they shouldn't have done or whatever, there's something that I've learned from every single supervisor I've had. Um, but the biggest thing that I think supervisors need to get in their head is you don't need to just talk to your guy when he's in trouble. If he's done something wrong, that shouldn't be the only time you're talking to him. You should be wanting to form good relationships with your subordinates. And the best supervisors that I've ever had are those the ones that have, hey man, how are you doing? Or the ones that come out in my stops that help me search cars, that get into the thick of it with me. And you know, a lot of guys don't like micromanagement. Well, I don't like micromanagement, and I guess I'll rephrase that. For me, I like when my supervisors watch my videos. I like when they're keeping tabs on me because that tells me that what I'm doing is not wrong. But the only time that they're watching a video is when there's a complaint. That's when there's a problem. Because or you know, that's the only time they're seeing your work. Because now you could be doing something for 6 months and then he watches it during a complaint and it's like, okay, you shouldn't have been doing that. And it's like, well, man, I've been doing that for 6 months. Like, why is that only a problem now? And so, keep tabs on your guys. If especially in interdiction or proactive policing areas, like if you know you have proactive guys, those are the guys that are going to generate complaints because they're making contacts. They're making the most contacts. And the greatest quote out there was from a Cowboys coach. I can't remember his name, but treat everyone the same differently. If you've got a third string guy that keeps making mistakes, cut him because he doesn't realize that he needs to be putting in more effort than everyone else. But if you got your starting quarterback falling, that makes a mistake, hey man, what can I do differently to help you so that doesn't happen in the future? Because those are the guys putting in the effort and those are the guys that you need to put the most effort in supervisor wise. You don't need to be watching or checking in on the guy who's just being reactive. You need to keep tabs on your proactive guys. So one, you can catch the burnout. If they're starting to burn out and they're starting to, like you're talking about, they're doing the reports differently. They're not putting as much effort in. Whoa. That's when we need to go in. We need to talk to them. Hey man, what's going on? Are you all right? Check on your guys, man. And it goes back to the mental health point. And those are the best supervisors. My best supervisor I ever had watched my videos. He pulled me in the office all the time. And for me, when I got pulled in the office by him, it wasn't, oh man, what did I do now? It was, okay, I'm about to learn something. I'm about to walk out of this room with a different perspective and with a different strategy. And so those were the best supervisors that I've ever had. And, but for someone who's not used to that, you could see that as micromanagement. But for me, I'm not scared of my supervisors watching my videos because I'm doing everything to the best of my abilities. But ultimately, there's a different approach, man. And some of these, if you're a supervisor, you've got experience. And so there might be a younger guy that's trying to get into interdiction, and he might just be, there's one thing he's got to tweak to open that Pandora's box and to be making these great hits. And if you're not paying attention to him as a supervisor, you're failing him. You have the answer to help this guy. And if you're not paying attention to your guy, you're failing as a supervisor. But this also goes back to the point of you don't have to be a supervisor to help someone. And, if you see someone doing something wrong, and you feel like you can help them with just a little bit of advice, hey man, you care if I give you my advice on something, or you care if I give you my perspective on what just happened or something like that. And there's going to be guys that are like, man, it's my call. I don't want to hear it. You're not my supervisor. Okay, man, I'm not, you're not going to get to that guy. But the guys that truly are in it for the right reasons and that are open, those are going to be your best partners because, there's going to be that open communication between the two of you. And then two, that's going to be, again, your best partner, like you're going to be making a big impact. So, kind of went off on the weeds on that one, but yeah.
No, you're good, man, and that's everything you said was 100% spot on, man. And it does come from within, and leaders have to lead, right? But even just to caveat on when you talked about like officers that are being proactive are going to generate, a high form of complaints. And that's very true. Even from my personal experience, I look back at all the complaints I was receiving when I was a younger officer. But more importantly, when I do a little bit of a self-evaluation, I tell a lot of officers. I was helping an officer. I'm pretty sure he was from North Carolina. And I think he's even in the group. And, he had an issue. He's like, man, my supervisor's always, giving me a hard time. I'm always getting complaints. And, he shared a particular video with me. He was like, man, look at this video and tell me if you see anything that like stands out. Like, I don't think I did anything wrong. And I'm watching it. And like, mind you, I'm talking to this dude on the phone. I met him once at a conference. So I've had like a baseline of how he normally talks. But when I watched the video, like less than a minute in, and I'm like, dude, you're talking down to people. You're kind of belittling people. Like, it's you, right? And I was like, you have to you reached out to me for advice, so I'm going to give you 120% response to that. And, I talk a lot about like your modality, your tone, your vocabulary, like how you talk to people is going to get, received, processed, and then they're going to give it right back however you give it to them. I would talk about people, man. Imagine, you're a guy and you're in the car and you have your family, right? That masculinity, and someone says something to you and it's smart, and you're in front of your family and your wife and your kids, like, you're not going to let that stand, right? You're going to push back at the officer. So, we have to just be mindful of what we're doing, what we're saying, because a lot of times, I always tell people, when you open that door on that traffic stop or that call of service, check yourself, remove your personal biases, any problems you got going on, on the shift, at home. You got to remove all of that, and you got to go into this new encounter, open-minded, and that'll usually help decrease the amount of complaints you get. Knock on wood, I think I had one complaint in probably like the last calendar year that I can think of. Totally smuggling. We didn't find anything. It was human smuggling, back in the human smuggling area. But that was literally, I had to think about that. Like, that was when you were talking, I was like, when was the last time I had a complaint? Like, when you get to that point in your career, you start realizing that in a lot of cases, it is you, right? And maybe it's just some small tweaks, right? Just getting off your high horse just for a second. And, when people get upset with me, I monotone them, man. I'm like, is everything okay? Are you all right? Like, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm just going to give you a warning. And then they go from this high screaming at me voice to like, all right, I'm not getting at this guy. All right, I'm just going to come back down. And then by the time they enter the stop sign, they're like, hey, you're a really nice officer. I'm like, thank you. Appreciate that. So it's just a mental game a lot of times. And you have to have the patience, because at the end of the day, I always teach this. My goal is not to write the ticket, right? My goal is to look beyond the traffic stop. And if I get to the point, and yes, I do have a dog, but if I wasn't a canine handler, and even the fact that I do have a dog, my end goal is to, if I need to ask for consent, I want to be able to ask for consent. If I'm being a douche and I'm talking down to people, I'm not going to be able to get the consent, because people are, they're kind of a little bit upset, man. So, dude, before we get into the questions really quick, one question I like to ask everybody, man, what is your why for wanting to do proactive law enforcement?
Yeah, man. So my why is that first traffic stop, man. That first traffic stop I made, and find that little boy that was being moved across state lines, and was missing to his family, and returning him to his family, man. That was like, that's my why, man. And seeing that happen all over the country from proactive guys, you know, drugs, man, it's awesome getting drugs. It's awesome, watching videos like of you pulling pounds out of cars of fentanyl and kilos and all this stuff. But, um, you know, that's awesome. But returning a child to their family, that's my why. And I get a little emotional when I talk about it, because, man, it's just like, law enforcement is something that I love. Like, I've got a passion for it. It's my calling. I don't know what I would do if it wasn't for law enforcement. And so it's a blessing that I have the opportunity to come out and make the impacts that I have. But it's also something, man, that can be taken away just as fast, so it's just, you got to be smart. you gotta just take every day like it's a new day. And yeah, so it's making an impact, man.
Yeah, 100%, man. Dude, Gary, I just want to say, man, it's always it's a blessing, a pleasure to have you on the show, man. You're a good friend, you're a good dude, and man, you got a long, prosperous career in front of you, man. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're out there doing the Lord's work, brother. Glad I had you on the show, man.
Appreciate it, man.